Hi everybody, it's Jen. Welcome back to my channel, Hallmark Plus More, where we watch and talk about shows, movies, mysteries, Hallmark ornaments, and anything else that floats our boat. So today I'm going to be reviewing a Hallmark Channel original series called Chicken Sisters, Season 1, Episode 7. So before I get into the review, I just want to say thank you to everybody who subscribes to my channel, likes my videos, leaves me comments. I appreciate it so much. If you have any comments, you can leave them below. I love interacting with everybody. So getting into this episode, it kind of starts out with previously on Chicken Sisters, and it shows a lot of scenes that happened previously. So a lot going on. Excited to get into this episode. You see Frank Jr. punch Sergio, after he loses that side dish competition, pushes Amanda aside. You also see May telling her boyfriend the truth. You see Sergio and Amanda kissing in the truck, and then you also see Frank Jr. calling the health inspector. So a lot went on in the last episode and previously. So this episode starts out seeing young Frank Jr. With Frank Sr. kind of growing up and looking up to his dad. And this is kind of the first time you see a perspective from Frank Jr., right? So we've seen Nancy and Frank Sr., but this is kind of where you're seeing him as a little boy and as a grown man kind of looking up to his dad. And he's encouraging him to take over the business. And here's this important meeting with clients, and he wants Frank Jr., to present, and he does, and he kind of messes it up. And everybody knows he's messing it up, right? So Frank Sr. is very disappointed in Frank Jr., and you kind of see that right away. And we know Frank Sr., or from what we've heard, he's not a good person. So when Frank Jr. disappoints him in front of this meeting, he kind of stops trying to get him to be like him, right? He's just disappointed in him, and he kind of stops trying to make him like him. Frank Jr. tries to make it up to him in his dad's eyes, right? He's trying to make it up to him that, he can do it, and he's sorry, and he can definitely take over the business. But then his dad dies. So even though his dad is dead and not around, Frank Jr., even though he's not there, he's still trying to, make his dad proud. So his goal is still to make his daddy proud, even though, he's no longer with us. So it was different to kind of start out the show seeing it from Frank Jr.'s perspective, because like I said, we don't typically see things from his point of view. However, I said in previous videos, I don't like Frank Sr. We find out, he wasn't a nice guy. Nancy is realizing her husband is not the same person she thought he was. Oh, he would never lie to me. He would never do that. And she's starting to realize maybe, he was a different person. And we see that here. He's grooming his son to take over the business, wanting his son to be like him. His son lets him down and, disappoints him. And then all of a sudden he's like done, and so this whole time Frank Jr. is trying to make it up to him, but Frank Sr. is like, nah, you screwed up. I'm over it. I no longer want you to be like me. Right. So I think it just adds to Frank Sr. kind of being a jerk when we see it from there. And then we see Amanda wake up in the back of Sergio's truck. So obviously, she's like, wait, it's morning. So she says, yeah, I had fun. She kisses him and leaves. And she's kind of sneaking back into town, right? In the same clothes she had on the day before. And then you see Frank Jr., and he's asleep in the phone booth, right? We see him go to the payphone to call the health inspector. Well, he fell asleep. You see beer cans everywhere, so he obviously got drunk and fell asleep in the phone booth. The sheriff finds him, actually picks him up, puts the siren on, and of course, he's got a hangover, but he's picking him up because he's on public property. So, Amanda kind of sneaks her way through town. She finally gets to the house. When she's walking up in the house, she sees Shauna. Shauna's like, "Hey, have you heard about Gus?" Because remember, Shauna works everywhere. She knows everything. So she tells Amanda, like, hey, somebody called the health inspection on Gus's house. So Amanda goes straight, to Mimi so she can tell Gus, like, what's going on. Maybe we can clean it before they get there, but we need May, right? So you see May kind of talking to her boyfriend, Jay, while they're kind of trying to work it out. And they interrupt and say, hey, we need you. Like, this is a family crisis. And so then you have, Gus, Amanda, and May and Jay there as well. And then, Shauna goes to work and tells Nancy, like, Amanda's not coming into work today. This is why she's not coming into work today. So Nancy now knows what's going on with Gus. And of course, even though Gus is the competition, Nancy's a good person. She's not seeing it as a rivalry. She's seeing it as somebody in town needs my help, right? Gus might be stubborn, but, her good heartedness wants to help. So Nancy kind of leads a group of people to come up to the house. And of course, Gus is like, oh, you coming here to gloat? And she's like, no, we're coming here to help. I've told these people we all want to help. Let us help, and Gus does. So you've got the town now in her house. You've got, Amanda, May, Jay, Sergio, everybody is trying to help. Kenneth and Patrick back at the end are trying to kind of keep Sabrina there, right? Because remember, she has a film crew. She's supposed to film at Mimi's. Gus's house is directly behind Mimi's. So obviously, if Sabrina shows up, she's going to see what's going on. So they're, coming up with tactics like, hey, we want to have our own reality show, or, trying to keep her there so that she won't find out. And eventually Sabrina does, leave the inn and goes and it's like, yeah, we're going to film it. Now, before this happened, Amanda's daughter, texted Sabrina's daughter and was like, hey, I need your help. So Sabrina's daughter was there. And so when she sees her mom show up with the film crew, she kind of has a spat with her mom, like, you can't film this. That's not right. And she decides to film it anyways. And then I guess, her conscience gets the better of us and she actually doesn't film it. But she has a little spat with her daughter because her daughter actually came to help. The sheriff comes to help too because he's still a member of the town. He wants to help. And he tells Amanda, yeah, I found Frank Jr. He was drunk as a skunk, found him in a phone booth, just sleeping it off. So Amanda is finding out, okay, my husband, was found in a phone booth and he was drunk. So she's realizing, like, okay, my husband's the one who called the health inspector, right? Which I'm kind of glad because that was my question from last episode. Is anybody going to figure out it was Frank Jr.? So, and then, May and Amanda kind of have flashbacks a little bit from growing up in that house with all of this stuff. And May starts having a panic attack. And remember, she had panic attacks in previous episodes. We know she does, right? So Amanda knows how to calm her down, just like when they were kids. So Amanda calms her down, which was a kind of a nice moment between the two sisters. And she's like, Mama's never going to pick us over this stuff, right? And Amanda's like, yeah, no, she's not. Like May and Amanda, they've said it before, but they're saying it together. Like this house is decades full of stuff and she picks the stuff over us and she's never going to pick us over the stuff. But Gus overhears them and it seems like for the first time, she's realizing what they're saying. The whole town is in her house from decades worth of junk and crap, right? That she's collected, never throws anything away. And so I feel like this time she hears them and it resonates with her. Like Gus, it kind of hits her like, my two daughters are crying, they're helping me. They're realizing that they think I picked the stuff over them. And maybe she's realizing she has, you don't really know. You just feel like Gus is kind of having that like, oh wow, okay, because she overhears them. Amanda's daughter finds a box of pictures of her mom when she was a kid. So that was kind of fun. She's smiling. Because I think as kids, as adults, when we're younger and we're kids, we never see our parents as kids, right? We just see them as the adult figure that's telling us what to do. We don't see them as, 6-year-olds or teenagers. So I think it was kind of nice for Amanda's daughter to see her mom as a kid and a teenager. And, Gus kind of tells Sergio, like, I wish I could do a do over. I wish I could have a clean slate. And I think she says that to Sergio after she hears her daughters basically say she picks the stuff over us and she always will. Then Amanda has that talk with Nancy and says, Nancy realizes you're wearing the same clothes, like, and it's like she's realizing that, right? Like, were you with Sergio? But she's also realizing that Frank Sr., she apologizes to Amanda. Like, I realize my husband handled things with Gus. I didn't know that, right? Like, I didn't know the dealings and how my husband did his business. So I apologize. Then she realizes she's in the same clothes. And Amanda actually says, no, I didn't betray you guys. Frank Jr. betrayed us. Everybody in town is in this house helping my mom, except one person, and that's Frank Jr. He's the one, who called the health inspector. He's the one who said he will win at all costs, and then Amanda says to Nancy, like father, like son, which you've heard me say, but for Amanda to say that, I mean, this is her husband too, right? Um, but Nancy's basically saying, I didn't realize Frank Sr. did certain things, and now Amanda's saying, well, your son's the same way. He's the one who called the health inspector. He's not here helping. He started this, he did this, and he'll win at all costs, So I thought that was a good conversation to have. Like Nancy's kind of having that realization, and Amanda is realizing it about her husband too, So Kitchen Clash comes, and Sabrina, obviously she wants to film, and you kind of see her start filming, but then you realize she didn't film it. May follows her back to the end and basically begs her not to film it. And Sabrina says, I'm not, I didn't film it, like I stopped. So I love that. Like for the first time in the series, you kind of see Sabrina have a conscience with work, right? We saw that really touching moment with Sabrina and her daughter. So we know Sabrina has a soft side. However, she hasn't shown it work related, right? She's always filmed and used the evidence that she has, or, keep stuff that, she's probably going to use later. So it was nice to see her not film it and, not want to put it on the show. And then you also see Jay and May working things out. And I was so happy to see that. You've probably heard me say before, I love Jay. I think he's a great down to earth guy. And I think he is really good for May. I think May realized it, obviously too late, hoping to work things out. And Jay is willing to work things out. He is not ashamed of where she came from. He is, everybody has their past, everybody comes from somewhere, and Jay is just so accepting of May. I love that. So I like that they're working things out. I hope we see Jay again. Like I hope he stays and works things out with May. And then Nancy actually confronts her son, confronts Frank Jr. Like, hey, you called the health inspector. Why did you do that? And he says it. I want to win at all costs. I want to make daddy proud. This would have made daddy proud. And I think Nancy kind of like is realizing, oh, that's who my husband was, and now that's who my son is. Um, and then while everybody's helping in the house, Gus, for some reason, is like, everybody leave, like, I'm done. And everybody's leaving, and May's like, where are you going? Like, no, 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 what are you doing? We still got work to do. So Gus decides to kind of kick everybody out. Um, and you kind of see she's realized that she's standing in her house with all of this stuff, and she's kind of realizing, I think, back to that conversation that she heard her daughter say, that she picks them over her daughters. So she's kind of coming to that realization. So she's alone in the house. She's kicked everybody out. And at the same time, remember I mentioned that Amanda's daughter was kind of going through old pictures and things like that from her mom, growing up in that house. She comes across a recipe book, and it looks like, old recipes, passed down from family to family, or, each family member. And she sees a letter, and it's addressed to Mimi on the envelope, and it's got a red seal on the back. So I'm like, okay, this letter looks kind of new. Like, it's a really old recipe book, but the envelope isn't torn or anything. And she opens the envelope, and she starts reading this letter. And after reading it a couple sentences, she like jumps up, like she's realizing what she's reading. And then you really don't see where she goes. But that's kind of a cliffhanger for the next episode. Like, okay, she finds this letter addressed to Mimi. We don't know how old the letter is. We don't know what's in the letter. But whatever's in the letter makes her jump up and realize what she's reading. And she like jumps up and like leaves, like, oh, I got to tell somebody something. And then you go back to Gus, right, alone in her house now, and she's pouring gasoline everywhere, and she walks out of her house. So you see, like, May is with Jay and Amanda and Sergio, and they're outside, and they're trying to realize and figure out, like, why did Gus make everybody leave? We're not done. Gus comes over to them, and they turn around and they see the house smoking because now the house is on fire. So they're all outside kind of watching the fire burn. And Gus, and they're like, we got to do something. We got to call the fire department. And Gus seems calm. She stands next to May and Amanda. She grabs both of their hands, or I shouldn't say grabs, but she holds their hands. So Gus is holding hands with both of her daughters, May and Amanda, and she says, let it burn. It's just junk. So I feel like that was kind of her realization, like, hey, I picked the junk over you, but I'm not doing it anymore. Remember, she wants a do-over, and Sergio goes, why can't you do a do-over? So I feel like this is Gus's way of doing a do-over and telling her kids, I might have picked that stuff over you before, but I'm not going to do it now. So they're all standing there watching the house burn, and then all of a sudden Gus falls down and faints. So now they're all like on the ground, like, Gus, wake up, are you okay? And that's where it ends. So there's great cliffhangers. I thought this was such a great episode, such a great turning point for so many characters, right? Gus has that realization. She's setting her house on fire. Nancy has the realization, right, that she's, coming to terms with her son, her husband's business dealings. He's not the person she thought he was. And now realizing her son is following in his footsteps and is doing these, not so good business moves, trying to be like his dad. And Nancy has always wanted her son to be like her husband. And now she's realizing, I shouldn't have done that because my husband wasn't a good person. And now my son is like my husband. So I feel like that's kind of a hard pill for her to swallow. We see Amanda, making out with Sergio a second time, and what that is going to involve, because now she knows her husband called the inspector on her mom, right? Even though she has a strained relationship, you noticed Amanda didn't even call Nancy, didn't go to work, went straight to her mom's house to help, because when your family needs you, your family comes through. So I like that Amanda came and helped. But yeah, there's definitely a lot to take in this episode, and exciting to see what happens next week. May, the preview for next week is May gets a call from New York. They want to, give her a new job or start a new show. So is she going to go have her life in New York? The kitchen class competition. They crown a winner. So, that's exciting. Obviously, there's some twist, I'm sure, in that, but that's exciting. And next week is the season finale. So that's exciting too. What are they going to wrap up, and what are they going to have as a cliffhanger for season two? So definitely a great episode, exciting, leaves us with a lot of questions for next week. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope you enjoyed my review. If you have any comments, you can leave them below. And until next time, I will see you then. Bye.